The U.S. Treasury Secretary says the unemployment rate is likely to get worse amid lockdown measures related to the coronavirus.
Back to where it was. This is no fault of American business. This is no fault of American workers. This is a result of a virus. And that's why the president and I were determined to put together the largest economic program ever to help American workers get through this. So you are correct. The reported numbers are probably going to get worse before they get better. But that's why we're focused on rebuilding this economy. We'll have a better third quarter. We'll have a better fourth quarter. And
Mnuchin was speaking with Fox News 2 days after the Department of Labor said the U.S. unemployment rate surged to nearly 15% in April. He indicated the White House is mulling over more fiscal measures to ease the economic pain from the coronavirus pandemic. The U.S. has already approved a rescue package worth more than $2 trillion to cope with the economic impacts of the outbreak. It is the worst hit country by the pandemic in the world, with more than 1.3 million infections. Joining us for more on that is Danny Shaw. He's an analyst and commentator from New York, and from New Orleans, from St. Louis rather, we have Michael Schaefer, librarian for American Culture Studies. Gentlemen, welcome. Danny, if I can start with you, what do you make of Mnuchin's remarks and the rising unemployment rates there?
Yeah, and those statistics don't even take into account how many people were already chronically unemployed and underemployed before we were hit with the coronavirus roughly 2 months ago. So this number of 33 million newly unemployed workers doesn't take into account tens of millions of families who are already suffering from joblessness. Another of the latest statistics, 20% of children in the U.S. right now are not receiving enough calories. They're malnourished, according to the Brookings Institute. So we're going through a recession and a depression that's affecting working class people in unprecedented ways. We would have to go back to the Great Depression to compare a period of U.S. history when something like this has been so dire.
Michael, if I can switch to you, how do you strike that balance between reopening the economy, if you like, and preventing a spike in coronavirus infections?
To what Professor Shore said, that he is correct about the unemployment rate. The official numbers are about 15%, but the real numbers are about 25% for all the people who are not counted, who are underemployed or who have dropped out of the labor force because they can't find a good job, or in prison, or are disabled. My children typically work in the summer, and they typically work at restaurants, but those restaurants aren't opening. As far as how you strike a balance, well, we have to prioritize people's health above everything. What's the point of having a job if it kills you? So really what we need income guarantees, we need health insurance guarantees, and we need job guarantees for all Americans. And
I suppose this all takes us back to the stimulus packages. Michael, if I can just stay with you, $2 trillion, you think that's sufficient? Has it reached the most vulnerable in society? Have they benefited from those stimulus packages?
Well, the first thing I can tell you is that only about a third of people who are eligible for unemployment have received it. We have unemployment systems that are run by our states, which are inadequate by design. They have old software that almost no one knows how to fix. It's quite clear people are not getting the assistance they need. I still have my job, and I had a 10% cut in my hours and pay in order for my institution to make it by.
Interesting. So, Professor Shaw, how did the United States become the epicenter of this pandemic? You got 80,000 deaths there.
Yeah, approaching 1.5 million positive cases. And it doesn't take into account how many cases of people who haven't been able to get to a hospital or get tested. This goes back to Martin Luther King's quote that the United States needs a revolution in terms of its priorities, because here is a society that has prioritized the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, and it has not prioritized everyday workers in their needs. So we see who's getting hit the hardest is the African-American population, the immigrant population, in the most vulnerable populations.
Okay, and Michael, just finally, there's lots of talk about President Trump. He keeps coming up in the news about his handling of this epidemic, this outbreak in the United States, pandemic rather. How do you see it? How do you see the response of the White House to the? He's recently dissolved the coronavirus task force. How do you see that response of the White House towards the Americans in the face of the coronavirus pandemic?
It's wholly inadequate and incompetent. One of the main problems that Americans are having is they're getting mixed messages from not just different scientists, but not only from different factions in the American political system, but even from within the White House. There have been different messages over the course of this virus. And of course, scientifically, health-wise, economically, people don't know what to do. That's why some people are desperate to get back to work despite the health risks. That's why some people are socializing and not observing social distance. There's just no effective leadership from the top.
Right. I want to thank our guests for their contribution to this Bulletin's News Review. Danny Shaw, the analyst and commentator from New York, and Michael Schaefer, librarian for American Culture Studies, joining us out of St. Louis. And dear viewers, thank you for staying tuned to this edition of the News Review.